Hello and welcome to week 5 of season 3 for the Virtual Racing School video tutorial series. For this week in the iRacing Blancpain GT3 series, I'm back in the BMW Z4 at the daunting Road Atlanta circuit, which is one of the shorter circuits on iRacing, but also one of the hardest to get the most from, and especially to do that consistently with its many blind corners and very harsh curbs. Which really need to be attacked for the quickest times. It also has huge elevation changes and is frequently compared to a roller coaster. References are far and few between, but I hope to provide you with a good analysis of how to tackle this extremely unforgiving circuit. And as per normal, I've set a qualifying fuel lap in default weather, and this was actually my second flying lap on this qualifying run, so the tyres were slightly past optimal, but it was quite tidy and so well suited for this tutorial. So first up, I'll play you the lap through for you on board. If I can find cockpit view. And across the line there for a 1 minute 19.054. I wouldn't be surprised to see mid-18s in default weather from the fastest guys, but it's very difficult to hook everything up, so for me this was sort of solid enough. So if we just go back to starting the lap, obviously you want a really good exit over the start-finish straight, so you'll want to be pretty much flat out from the exit of the chicane at the top, at the well, sort of at the top of the hill, and then as you come obviously down the hill, you want to be flat out through the right-hander to start your lap. Obviously, the last thing that you want to do is to go over onto the grass, and so that's quite nice. Into turn 1, obviously it's quite a fast corner. So even though the brake markers start very early here, you want to be braking super late, so you want to carry lots of speed in. So what I use is this grey patch on the tarmac here, and I kind of brake in the middle of it, so just as you pass over it I hit the brakes, fairly hard on the brakes initially, but obviously as I'm turning in I'm bleeding straight off them again, bringing it down to 4th gear and then kind of rolling it through with some trail braking throughout, sort of to keep it tight. So keeping on those brakes up until you pretty much reach the curb on the inside, and then hard on the throttle there. So very aggressively on the power because the car's all loaded up, and as long as you slow the car down enough for the apex, you can afford to commit to that hard on throttle. Obviously you want to get close to this curb, but you don't want to make contact with it, so that's, well, I do make the slightest bit of contact, so to rephrase that, you can make slight contact with it, but the important thing on the exit is to judge your apex speed, so you're not going to run out of track, basically. And you want to be in a position where you can bring the car, whilst you're still flat out, towards sort of the middle of the circuit for turn 2. Now, for turn 2, obviously you're turning left now to get back over to the left from your. By moving over to the right, you've opened up the entry. So now I'm opening up back over to the left again, and then pretty much as this curb, as you crest over the top. Obviously, with it being blind, it's very, very difficult to judge this. But with more and more laps, you sort of get used to it. So, but for me, as this curb here on the left comes into sight, that's pretty much when I start braking. Now, I don't brake very hard at all here. It's about a third input, and I actually brake a little bit early here, so I come out of the brakes slightly before going back on them again. But I'm never more than a third brake pressure. So, and that's because you're turning the car to the left to open the right hander up as you're braking. So, and this is one of the reasons why the setup for this week that I've put on the website has quite a high or a forward brake bias, and that's for braking stability, because into this corner it can get really, really out of shape. So obviously once you've slowed the car down enough, it's pretty much just a case of again, as the second apex comes into view, or the right hander comes into view, this curb here in the middle, you want to be turning in again, and just the slightest bit of trail braking throughout here until you reach the apex, just to keep the car over to the right, so that you can ensure that you have a nice line through the S's all the way up through to turn 5, because pretty much your line through here is going to certainly determine or be a large sort of contributing factor to your line throughout the whole sequence. So just let the car settle, and you pretty much want to straddle that curb if possible. So you can actually afford to take a little bit more curb than I have done here, but not too much. You will get a 1x if you are too aggressive with it. So again, let the car settle as it lands, and then get back on the power. So the only thing is, obviously, you're probably going to collect this exit curb up, and you can afford to run along this curb, but you can't. What you can't afford to do is get back to full throttle immediately. So I don't actually reach full throttle, and I have a secondary lift, or a lift, just one lift, to then sort of maintain a tight line. So if I didn't have the lift, the car would kind of drift out wide a little bit, and it's very important to keep the line tight to set up for the S's. So as you're coming down here, only now have I reached full throttle. I'm in 4th gear. I bring the car all the way over to the left, very close to this curb here on the left, and then as this curb comes up on us, we're beginning to turn right again. Now, I had a very slight confidence lift there, and that's pretty much always going to be required unless you absolutely nail your line through here, because otherwise you're going to run too wide down here onto this very aggressive curb. Now, the BMW can take curbs quite heavily, especially compared to the Audi, which you have to be a lot more sort of tentative and respectful with. But you can use the curves a little bit more with the Z4. But even so, if we have a look here, I'm kind of only just riding that first curb, and then as the car comes down, I am fully on that curb on the left. Now, it's quite an impact when you hit it, so you need to be prepared for the car sort of going out of shape slightly. But fortunately, if you do get it right, mostly due to that lift earlier, you'll be able to keep it flat out all the way up to turn 5, which is what I've done. So just before the braking zone, you want to be bringing the car back over to the right, and then you want to be braking just pretty much where the curb starts. So if we just rewind that slightly, So pretty much as the curb starts, I'm on the brakes. It's an uphill braking zone, so you can be quite hard on the brakes. And you can actually run this curb ever so slightly, not too much because it's quite aggressive as you sort of crest over, and you don't want to unsettle the car when you start to turn left. But so 60% braking or so before I then start to turn in again, bleeding off the brakes, and your line into here is again super important. You want to turn in so the car is hugging this curb as much as possible without making contact. If you make contact with this curb, it's going to create all sorts of problems for you, and you'll probably run wide and run out of track and be in all sorts of trouble. Simply because the optimal line, if you do hook this up, is to really abuse this exit curb. So you're pretty much on the absolute edge anyway. So the slightest disturbance is going to throw you off even more. So as I apex, I'm actually rolling through here with no inputs, and I pick up the throttle very carefully. I can feel that the car is quite settled for me at this stage, and I can sense that I can afford to commit to full throttle. Obviously you want to commit to full throttle as soon as you can. Sometimes if you do carry just a little bit too much speed through, you can't commit so early. As you get onto this curb, it can be quite aggressive. So also notice as I do get onto the curb, my steering input is now almost entirely straight. Again, with curbs you want to be minimal either on your pedals or on your steering, so as to not induce any balance shift that the curb will otherwise do for you anyway. So all the way up onto that curb, the car kind of bumps around a bit, but if you're lucky you can keep it flat out. Obviously again it's helped by keeping your steering nice and straight over the top here, up into fourth, avoiding the grass if possible on the right. That was just about right there. As we approach turn 6, which is an uphill corner, but the braking zone for it starts 200 meters ahead, I guess. There's also a line on the circuit, but I pretty much brake bang on where that line is. And almost immediately as you start braking, you're turning in for the corner. Now the corner is quite heavily cambered, so you can aim for quite a tight line, so you can start turning in quite early. But often you find the car likes to understeer through here, so to kind of maintain a tight line, you need to hold that trail braking for quite some time. So initial application on the brakes is quite hard, and then trailing off, but then maintaining that trail brake pressure. As you pass the inside curb and you apex, you're hard on the throttle. Well, I say hard, fast on the throttle, but not quite to 100% there. So my initial application was only 70%, and then I kind of brought it up to 80, 90, and then only when the car was kind of straightening out and lining up on that outer curb do I commit to full throttle. And then it's a very, very short, brief run of full throttle before you're hard on the brakes again. And not too hard, because generally your optimal line through here is to brake on the curb, which is what I'm doing now. So I'm on the curb, so I can't afford to brake too hard, but again 50 to 60%, and then just before you reach the end of that curb you want to start turning in. Now it's super important for you to get a really nice exit here, because you have a very long straight down to the chicane. So obviously getting a good exit is top priority here. So just kind of hesitating and being patient, waiting for the optimal the line, the car to kind of sit into the optimal line. And again, quite patient on the throttle application as well. But yeah, generally to give you the best exit, you want to be as far over to the left as possible from when you start turning in, so that allows you to cut in nice and tight to straight line the exit, really open up the steering and let the car run out to keep the kind of cornering to a minimum on the exit. That's the goal, and then that will allow you to get to full throttle just before this curb, ideally. And you can use this exit curb. Obviously, again, you need to be quite open with the steering, which is what I'm doing. So the car is completely straight now, and away we go. So I'm just going to fast forward it through here, but obviously you want to keep your line, your steering input to a minimum, and gradually sort of bring the car hugging the white line as you head downhill. Now, braking into the chicane, which is the last sort of it's the last braking zone for certain. I think I brake just before 100 meters. So, yeah, just before 100 meters. They're very, very hard on the brakes. You're braking from very high speed. You've got lots of downforce at this point, and the track kind of starts to compress. It levels out from the downhill. So you've got lots of grip for this braking zone. Just keep the car in a straight line until the speed comes down before eventually turning in, and then you want to be slow enough to be confident to where you can make it through the chicane, straight lining as much as you can, so as much as the first curve especially as you can get away with before you get a 1x. So I'm just coming off the brakes. Now notice this time I'm not trail braking at all, and that's really because by using so much of this curb, this chicane really kind of sucks you in and pulls you around. So if you were to be trail braking, you would most definitely induce oversteer, and you'd probably be turning too aggressively to the left on the exit. You'd be fighting the car to bring it back over to the right, and it's very important to get through here with a nice amount of sort of momentum, so to give you a nice exit. So just kind of rolling through here now that I've got my braking done, rolling over the curb, being patient with the throttle, not quite full throttle between, and then importantly notice there I short shifted up to third, and then that allowed me to not have to worry about too many gear changes as I sort of approach the bridge at the top. So we just see that again, off the throttle again, short shifting into third. Let's just play that through so you can hear it. Short shift there, progressive on the power because I'm going from quite low speed there and I'm heavily traction limited, and then full power before you get to the bridge, and as you crest over the bridge you'll hear the traction control engage. So it's really important to keep your steering straight as you crest over through here, because otherwise you will get oversteer, and you'll either have to have a big catch or a big lift to sort yourself out. But so just straighten the wheel. I did actually have the tiniest of counter steer there, and what that will do is it will end up aiming you towards the outer curb before the final corner, which you can afford to just sort of run your outer wheels over ever so slightly there. You've got to be quite careful because of this grass, but it is important to let the car run out all the way over here to the left if you are able to, if you're going to be able to make it through the final right-hander flat out, which is quite important for a good lap time on a qualifying lap. So now that I've done that, I'm quite nicely set up, now turning in quite hard, relatively speaking, for the speed, to a point where I know that I'm going to be able to carry this line through and keep it flat out without running wide on the exit, but also not turning in so early as to clip this apex here on the right. So you want to get as close as you can, but to not clip it, because that's going to again unbalance, unsettle the car and put you off. And then using all the curb on the exit, because I carried a nice amount of speed across the line. And there we are. That was a qualifying lap analysis at Road Atlanta. As ever, you can find All setups, replays and telemetry for your own use and analysis on virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-on-one tuition with top drivers from Commander SimSport. Good luck for this week, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.